Again! Her arms hurt, and she felt them pulsate. It was hard to hear anything but her own labored breathing, the voice of her teacher just barely audible over it, and the rushing sound in her ears. She blinked. She had to. Sweat was dripping down her brows, and if she didn't blink, it would get in her eyes. Her eyes would start burning, and she, for sure, wouldn't stand any chance at all. Not that she had ever won. But why handicap herself even more? She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself, but in a cruel twist of fate, this attempt made her cough. Before she could react, calm her lungs down enough to obey her command again, she felt a hard impact. Her head began to ring, and she impacted hard on the floor, a white flash replacing her vision. Her breath was knocked out of her, and the coughing began anew, even more violent this time. She sat up, one hand up in a stopping gesture, the other on her chest, trying to calm her lungs down. After a few moments, the cough subsided. In her frustration, she yanked her helmet off her head, thick strands of black hair falling around her face, frizzled and drenched in sweat. She felt 2 points of pain on her head, one in the front and one in the back. She fought with the instinct to touch these points. Defeated, she slowly sank back, katana still in her right hand, all limbs stretched out of. At the disappointed sigh of her teacher, she couldn't help but roll her eyes. "What?" she snapped, her voice sharp and yet sounding defeated. Her teacher, Sakamura Mihagu, now came into her field of view, that was turned towards the blue sky. The white oni marks on his face grimly grinned down on her as if to mock her. The next moment Sakamura removed it, revealing his fleshy face. "You got distracted," his deep voice rumbled. She turned her eyes away from him in annoyance. She knew that. Why did he have to say it? Of course she got distracted. She always did. Either it was her body beginning to fail after what felt like hours of harsh and unrelenting training, or Sakamura outsmarted her. Something always distracts her. And it always ends with her ass on the ground. And every time Sakamura had to point out the painfully obvious fact that she, again, had failed in her task to become a better warrior. She pushed herself up into a half-sitting position and glared at him. "Of course I did. When do I not? Like, ever. Every day you say this sentence at least once. By all the hells!" His eyes softened, his big, bushy brows furrowing a bit as he locked eyes with her. "Good. You noticed. Now it's time to act." He smiled, and to her surprise, she felt her anger subside. Not entirely, she was too furious with herself, but the frustration she held against him slowly but surely vanished. Sakamura held a hand towards her. She grabbed it, and he helped her up. For a short moment, Airi felt like she was about to fly off into the nearly perfect blue sky above them. So much was the strength with which he pulled her off the ground. But then her feet touched the ground again. Sakamura smiled at her, put his mask back on his face, and walked some distance. Airi picked up her helmet and inspected the small new scratch that it had sustained. For another short moment, rage flared up inside of her. How could she be this careless with her equipment? She was the head of her family now. She couldn't just throw her armor away in a fit of rage. But before she spiraled again, a call caught her attention. Someone was calling her. "Lady Koroma! Lady Koroma!" Airi turned around to see one of her young servant girls in the open door to the house. She had a worried look on her face. Airi turned towards Sakamura, the big man acknowledging with a nod that she had to go. Gently this time, Airi put her helmet down, sheathed the katana, and walked to the girl. What is it, Mirasu?" She couldn't help but notice the involuntary sharpness that infiltrated this simple question. The second she ended the sentence, she bit her own tongue. The girl just lowered her head and said, "Your father called for you." For a short moment Airi stopped breathing, but she caught herself. No need to escalate anything. Bring me to him, Mirasu. The girl performed a quick bow and then started leading Airi to her father. And as they walked, Airi noticed how different both of them walked. Her own steps were tense but wide, free of restricting clothing, in contrast to Mirasu. Her steps were small and fast, limited by the small window of movement her clothes allowed, and yet the girl moved swift and with purpose. Airi was led through what was now essentially her estate to the room of her father. The servant opened the sliding door, bowed to Airi, and then stepped aside. She stepped inside the room, which was flooded with sunlight, and the only furniture was a low table. There he sat, her father, his left leg stretched out under the table. As he noticed her, he stiffly turned, careful and slow, as if he would fall over if he turned too fast. A sad smile was carved onto his face, deepening the wrinkles around his mouth and eyes. Airi, my daughter. He stretched out a hand, reaching for her before signaling her to sit next to him. She bowed slightly before sitting down on the pillow next to him. She was his superior now, but he was still her father. And old habits are rarely broken overnight. You sent for me, father? Mirasu yelled like it was a great emergency. He blinked slowly, still the same sad smile on his face, since her mother, his wife and their head of the family, was exiled by their lord, Richard Blackthorne, 2 months ago. It had impacted both of them hard and changed them in a drastic way. Before her mother's exile, her father moved with grace and precision. Nowadays, he remembered her of an old turtle, slow and fragile, seemingly devoid of energy to move, but still, somehow, doing what they needed to do. And she now had all the burdens that once belonged to her mother on her shoulders. Yes, she had been trained to do this one day, as she was the only child of the family Kuroma, but none of them had expected her to step up this early in her life. She didn't feel ready, but what was a feeling? She had to step up, to take control of the situation and gain the best out of it. Her train of thought abruptly ended as her father turned to his left, a nearly silent groan accompanying his shift. He grabbed something that sat hidden behind his figure and the pillow he sat upon, but as he held it toward her, a confusion grew inside her. What her father had in his hands was a long and narrow wooden box, carved with flames and a rising sun, the symbols of her family. On it a letter lay, the paper already a bit wrinkled. Her father kept his sad smile as he reached for the box and the letter. With shaking hands she put the wooden container down on the table and unfolded the paper. The writing was some of the better calligraphy she had seen, but its beauty couldn't overshadow the message it wrote. To the members of the loyal Kuroma family. The loyal felt not at all sincere, like a cruel joke to punish her family further. I regret what happened to all of you upon the actions of Kuroma Mei had to take in order to save the life of one of her family members. And I am terribly sorry to have pushed especially Kuroma Airi into a role no one of you thought her to be ready. With this letter I sent you a piece to remember Kuroma Mei by, for even though she planned to betray and assassinate me, she did so in the name of her family, and there is no greater honor than to fight for those we love. In gratitude to all of your services, Richard Blackthorne. Airi stared at a piece of paper in her hands, her head still trying to wrap around what stood written on it. Was this his attempt at humiliating them? Attacking them? Did he want to test them to see if there were more traitors in the midst of the family? Or was he sincere and meant every lie in his brushed through. Her head spun, questions and thoughts swirling inside of it, bumping into each other, colliding to form new and even more abstract trains of thoughts that seemed more and more outlandish. She closed her eyes and took deep, controlled breaths to calm herself. Slowly, the chaos in her head gave way to calm and serenity again. With a sigh of relief, she opened her eyes again. She noticed that the fingernails of her thumbs had dug themselves through the paper. Without looking at her father, she put the letter down on the table, and with shaking hands, she opened it. In the box, splintered into many, many pieces, lay the broken tsuba of her mother's Nadachi. Ari's breath hitched, and suddenly all of the thoughts in her head, screaming and bawling as they were, went deathly silent. There was no bickering, no what if, what conditions she thought she had to meet. There was just nothing. When next she spoke, her own voice sounded distant, wrong. Commission a wall ornament to store it. She felt herself stand up. She noticed that her feet carried her out of the house, and she heard Sakamura's worried question, but she didn't react. She couldn't. Her legs wouldn't listen to the screams in her head, telling them to stop. Her voice wouldn't obey her demand to speak, to comfort her father and calm Sakamura's worries. She couldn't. And her legs carried her further and further off her property, through the streets of the city and out of it into the dense, swampy mangrove forest. She noticed the muggy water leaking into the fabric of her trousers and shoes. The stench of mold, rotten wood, and fungi buried itself into her nostrils, but still her mind couldn't command her feet to stop. Further and further she walked, without control over her body, mud and water sloshing under her steps. And then, after what felt like an eternity, her feet stopped walking. For a long moment she just stood there, before all the thoughts, all the feelings, and all the pressure swept over her at once, like a great wave. Her knees buckled, and she fell, her trousers now soaking fully in the foul swamp water. She sat in a pond, and didn't know if the water running down her cheek was a tear, or the water of the Maya. Her head spun again, her vision blurring more and more with each second, and as she was sure that it were tears streaming down her face, she threw her head back and screamed at the canopy above her. It was long and guttural, and it stretched till her breath ran shallow and she ended up in a frantic cough. After it subsided, she sat up, pulled her legs in, and just sat there. Finally, everything seemed to calm down. Her breath steadied. She noticed that she was shaking. She wrapped her arms around her legs, placing her chin on her knees, and just stared at the with algae covered swamp water that surrounded her. Its surface was still rippling from her movement, and in a bitter moment of irony, she found that it represented her soul and thoughts right now. Somewhat at peace, and yet not far from becoming a whirling mass again. Pond water dulls the edge more so than the heat of battle. At the sound of the deep, familiar voice, Airi turned around. There, on a fallen log and with his legs crossed, sat Sakamura, his terrifying mask beside him. Airi smiled bitterly. "I'm just taking a bath. You should join me." The Shugoki lifted a brow before eyeing the muggy water beneath him. "I'll pass. The stench would remain for weeks to come. And I hate algae." Airi chuckled involuntarily, but that delight soon vanished from her face as her eyes once again focused on the water in front of her. "How am I to manage all of this, Miyagu? How can I fill her boots when I can't even keep myself on my own feet for more than an hour?" The big warrior shifted, the rotten wood of the log beneath him creaking under his weight. She looked up to him and saw that he now had his giant kanabo across his knees. The club was too big and heavy for her to wield, but it fitted Sakamura perfectly. The base wood was light, but what really made this weapon unique were the bright white kitsune that were painted across its surface. He traced a finger along one of the blades that stuck out of the wood, making the weapon even more imposing as it was before. "Tell me, do you believe your mother was in the wrong for what she did?" This question caught Irie off guard. She thought that he was here to comfort her or send her back on the right way, to back her up. But here he sat, questioning her about the crimes of her mother. Of course not. Never should you put feelings above your duty to your daimyo and the mayor. Sakamura just stared at her, his brown eyes looking way too tiny for someone of his stature. "Then why, do you think, did your mother do it then?" Irie began to look for an answer, but all the thoughts in her head didn't offer any. Becoming desperate, she began to stutter, to buy herself time for more thinking, but all it yielded were hollow thoughts that went nowhere. Finally, she gave up and glared at her teacher. "It doesn't matter why she did it. She shouldn't have done it. End of discussion," she hissed, but the sharp tone was more anger over herself than anyone else. Sakamura let out a long sigh before he stood up, grabbed his mask and kanabo, and climbed down from the log. The look in his eyes confused Irie. She couldn't decide if he looked angry or disappointed. "Kuroma Mei did what she did out of love to you, your family, and your legacy. Never should one whose hands were forced to be held accountable for crimes they committed while on a string like a puppet." His voice sounded dangerous, and yet something different came through, but Irie couldn't make out what it was. "You are young, Irie." He didn't even use any titles now. She was about to put him in his place for that, but he wouldn't let her. "You are young and naive, reciting what has been hammered into your head since the day you were born. To become strong, to be loyal and obedient warrior, and to be the heir to your mother's position. Yet all of this doctrine, this station, and your heirdom, this isn't you. And no matter what, you should never let anything change how you see the world. No doctrine, no station, and no mistake. Think for yourself." Irie frowned. "You speak like a gaijin, Sakamura. Do you even hear yourself? Honor and duty are always up front, never to be left aside. For no reason ever should you put your own needs before them, and nothing will justify doing so." With a sad sigh, Sakamura lowered his head. "None of what you just said is truly you." "And what do you know? Your mother didn't betray your daimyo. She didn't leave you from one minute to another. She didn't leave you unprepared and doubting each and every move you make. Don't tell me who I am when I don't even know it. Am I a general's daughter? Am I a general? Or just a glorified swordswoman that pretends to play in the big leagues? By the Empress's glory, I don't even know myself anymore, Sakamura. How? Tell me!" The Shiguki stood there, his eyes digging deep into her very soul. Irie placed a rogue strand of her hair behind her ear and shifted a bit. And as Sakamura spoke, his voice wasn't filled with anger or rage. There was something else, an unsteadiness that caught her off guard. "I know how you feel. I too have been left stranded, wondering what I am. Am I a demon, a monster, or a protector? As you see, Irie, I decided to be a protector. And why? Not because I listened to all the people around me. They saw me as a monster, a threat even, that had to be eliminated. And yet I stand here, offering you a hand. Koroma Airi, I can help you, just as I promised your mother. Airi stared at him. His calmness, she would even describe it as sadness, made her stop. This was her protector from her childhood days. She knew this man her whole life, and even though her own problems seemed to want to swallow her whole, she couldn't help but wonder what Sakamura must have gone through to speak these words. There was no doubt in her that he was being honest. This wasn't his usual tone she knew from their training, nor the cheerful friend she knew. She simply didn't recognize this side of him. What happened to you, Miharu? Even with the mask, she could see that his gaze was fixed on the muggy swamp water at his feet, and she realized that he had the feeling that he had said too much. After a long pause, he finally started speaking, but slowly and with care, as if he feared that speaking too loud or fast would break something. I'm not what you nor your family thinks of me. I gave your mother the promise to guard and guide you, but she didn't even know that I was making this vow. Yes, I am a protector, but once I was a destroyer. I once murdered and grew stronger from it. I slew men and women alike, no feeling but hunger, and no other desire than power. By the Kami, I brought the fires of the 9 hells to this realm, and I enjoyed it. With each death that was brought by my hands, I grew stronger and more ruthless. I was a monster. I was in need of being disposed of. But instead of others shunning me into exile or forcing me to commit seppuku in order to regain honor, I changed from a murderer to a protector. For even a guardian needs to know how to be violent. And at some point I met your mother. And the first thing I did was promised her that I would teach and protect you. Airi struggled to make sense of what Sakamura told her. But before she could say something, the Shugoki took off his mask once again and, a half-hearted smile on his face, put a hand on her shoulder. In time, you will find your path. Until then, I will be here at your side. Now let's get back. You aren't the only one that needs help right now. Gently he pushed her around, and with his hand on her back, they both went back towards the Koroma estate. As they came within the sight of the house, Sakamura took his hand from her back and let himself fall back a bit. She knew he did this to support her new station, but she wished he would still be this close. But it was no use, she had to be strong now. 2 servants welcomed her, each one holding a wall mount for her mother's tsuba. Immediately she felt her knees buckle again, but at the heavy sound of Sakamura's steps behind her, she found her strength to remain in control of her body. For a long moment she looked at both options that were presented to her, but in the end she came to a different conclusion. Fetch me a weaponsmith, she told one of the servants. He looked confused but bowed and hurried off to fulfill his new order. With a wave of her hand she sent the other servant away and made towards her house. Making her way in, Sakamura stayed at the door, like it was his duty. She again wished that he would stay, but it would be a breach of protocol, and right now, she wasn't able to persuade him. So she went on without him. She made her way through 2 rooms before arriving in the dining area. Her father still sat before the table, Blackthorn's letter, the box and the broken tsuba still in front of him, in his hand a pipe, and this pipe smoldered the remains of tobacco. Without any words she sat down beside him, placed the broken handle inside the box again, and then reached for his hand. As she touched it, she felt his trembling. He didn't even try to mask it. There was no need. It was only the two of them, and they both knew that the otter was feeling the same way. They sat like this for some time, sharing the pipe between them. Irene now understood why some high-ranking people smoked it on a regular basis. For some reason the smoke, the taste and smell of the tobacco calmed her down. As the smoldering of the pipe ceased and all the tobacco was used up, they continued to stay silent, and Sakamura opened the sliding door to the room. He bowed before speaking. "Lady Koroma, the weaponsmith you sent for has arrived." Irie's father looked confused. "A weaponsmith? What are you?" Irie stood up, gave Sakamura the box and with her mother's broken tsuba, and turned around to help her father on his feet. He groaned as each move strained his back, but at last he stood. Irie then made her way to the entrance, followed by Sakamura and her father. The moment she stepped through the door, the smith fell to one knee and erected his gaze to the ground. It was a gesture Irie still wasn't used to, and she doubted if she ever would. She waved Sakamura to her side, took the box from him, opened it, and held it out in front of her. "Do you think you can reshape it so that it could replace the tsuba on my katana? I'm in need of a new one." The man took the box and looked at the handle that once was big enough for an adachi. "I'd have to shorten it so you won't have the whole tsuba, but I'm sure I can refit it to your sword, my lady." "Then do so, and be careful. This tsuba is important to my family." The smith bowed once again and then walked off to do his trade. For a moment no one moved, until Irie turned around and went back into the building. Her father and Sakamura right behind her. Arriving in the dinner room, she sat down at the table and ordered a maid to bring food and drink. Sakamura and her father arrived shortly after her, and the large warrior helped his master to sit down, a tedious ordeal made harder by the low height of the table. Finally sitting down, her father breathed a sigh of relief. Irie then signed Sakamura to sit down too. Her teacher hesitated for a short moment, but then he did as he was told. He looked out of place, towering over both Irie and her father, even when sitting down. "Irie, what is all this?" her father asked, and his voice swung a trace of joy but also concern. Irie smiled and grabbed his hand. "I know, all three of us know, that I wasn't ready for this position. But I now found the spark to do everything in my power to live up to whatever you, this family, and our daimyo needs." Both her father and Sakamura seemed surprised by that statement. Her father called himself first. "Irie, my daughter, are you sure that this isn't too much for you? I mean no disrespect towards you, but just now you rushed off into the swamps. I'm thankful to Sakamura for following you. Are you sure this is the best way for you?" Irie took a deep breath for a second. She hesitated. Should she really say this now? "Father, Sakamura, I am going to be honest with you. No, this won't be the best for me. But I have to do this. For me, for you, father, and for mother. This won't be easy, and I know that. But in the name of every kami, I will prevail or fall trying. You are right to send Sakamura after me, father. He showed me a different way of looking at things, and that is what all of it resulted in. I will carry our family name with pride, no matter what mother has done. If the Black Dragon resents us now, so be it. I haven't sworn my loyalty to him yet, but I've sworn it to this land and the second I was born in it." She sighed. "I won't be perfect. I will need both of you at my side to guide me. Can I ask this from you?" Her father glanced at Sakamura before clearing his throat. "I will always be beside you, my dear, but..." Maybe don't utter words against the daimyo like these out loud. We might not be samurai, but I am sure that even Ashvalians see treason when they see it. Excuse me. Excuse me, master. But I think what Lady Koroma, wants to say with this is that she won't refuse Daimyo Blackthorn. But if he wants to make us suffer on behalf of what Koroma made it, she won't hesitate to denounce him and fight for us. Did I understand you right, my lady? Irie nodded. She didn't want to betray or denounce Richard Blackthorn outright. It wasn't inherently his fault that her mother betrayed him, but she wasn't going to be so naive as to blindly follow him either. A week later, Irie heard a knock on the door to her room. With a precise movement that she still felt was too slow, she put the brush aside. "Come in." Sakamura Mihaku came in, a big wooden crate in hand. "My lady, your new sword has arrived." He bowed, holding the crate out in front of him. Irie stood up, took the box and opened it. In it was her katana, the same blade, but the tsuba of her mother. She felt tears fill her eyes as she saw the beautiful braided tsuba connected with her own blade. She closed the box again and put it down next to the letter she was writing before turning back to Sakamura. "Pay the smith for me. I won't be able to. And thank him for his work. I really like it." Sakamura turned around, but before she could leave the room, Irie again directed her words at him. "And Mihagu, I know this is much to ask, but would you look over the change of our family sigil? I want a Kitsune added. When one wants to protect me, I might as well show it." The big man turned around, surprise and disbelief in his face. "How?" Irie couldn't stop herself and began to laugh. "I knew the real Sakamura since the day I was born. We were close. Of course I know this life. Of course I know his life. And I certainly would remember if he ever told me anything about being seen as a monster that has to be disposed of. Besides, I talked to my father." She took a deep breath. "I am not mad you killed him. But did he suffer? Mihagu, I mean." Sakamura stood there for a second before he bowed deep. "He did not, my lady. That I promise."